Hello and welcome to the Earth's Features Unit Internalization video. My name is Sean Tamarisk of KIPP, Massachusetts. This unit is all about rocks and fossils. Our big unit question is, how do scientists know what the environment was like in the past? And rocks and fossils will be our clue to that understanding. The anchor phenomena starts the unit off by telling students that a fossil has been found in a rocky outcrop in a national park, specifically Grand Canyon National Park in the Arizona desert. Students are shown a picture of this fossil and begin to think about what could possibly have caused it to be located in the middle of a bunch of rocks. As they go through the unit, they learn more and more about how fossils form and about how different rock layers form under different environmental conditions and gradually layer upon one another to form sedimentary rock. So before we dive in, please make sure you have completed these tasks so that you're fully ready to unpack this unit. Previously, in ancient times, fossils had been discovered all over the world, but they were ascribed to superstitious phenomena such as dragons or demon tongues. But as amateur geologists set out across the world and began studying rocks more systematically, some surprising things were found. For example, the fossilized remnants of sea creatures such as this ammonite, as well as clams, fish, and tropical ferns at the tops of massive mountain peaks. For example, in Argentina, more than 11,000 feet above sea level. What on earth were they doing here? Scientists such as Thomas Lyell proposed that through gradual processes inside the Earth's crust, those sea creatures' fossils were pushed up little by little, inch by inch, year after year, from the very depths of the ocean floor to the tops of mountain peaks. And extrapolating backwards, scientists realized that this could mean only one thing. The Earth is a lot older than the 6,000 years calculated in the Bible. This unit's important because it has the potential to change how students view themselves and humanity's place within the universe. In the great spectrum of living things that have come and gone on this planet, the true place of humankind is but a tiny fraction of the entire time that the Earth has been in existence, with whole biomes of creatures appearing and disappearing through mass extinctions. It's vitally important for our students to understand how science has come to these conclusions about the age of the Earth using the rocks under their own feet. So we're on a mountaintop just north of Boston, and just by looking at these rocks, we can begin to read the story of the history of this area. So right here, this mountaintop has got that speckled appearance of igneous rock, which means it was formed in volcanic eruptions. Scientists have figured out by studying the layers of rock and dating them that all of these eruptions happened about 600 million years ago when North America collided with a now extinct continent called Avalon and then separated again. So at various times in the last billion years, the Boston area was filled with active volcanoes. It was underwater, under the ocean. It was a warm, hot, swampy environment, and it was under dozens or thousands of feet of ice and glaciers. In fact, all over the northern U.S., you can see the scrapes that glaciers have left behind as they gradually scrape their way, melting out to sea. Once again, the way scientists have pieced this together is just by reading the rocks like a book and seeing what stories those rocks tell. All right, let's jump into our chapter overviews. Our first big question is, how do fossils form in rocks? Taking a look at the anchor phenomena, how on earth did that fossil get into that rocky outcropping? We start by looking at pictures or actual physical specimens of fossils and learning about observations and inferences. An observation being, for example, I see what look like feet bones, leg bones, a skull right here. My inference is that this is actually a frog, and so this environment must have been a watery environment at one time. My observation here is that this looks a lot like modern-day ferns, so maybe this was a warm environment when this fossil was made. Students then read the book Clues from the Past about archaeologist Rodolfo Correa and the observations and inferences he makes in his line of work. Students then interact with the Earth's Features simulation and begin to unpack how sedimentary rock layers form and how that's important for fossil formation. They watch sediment being carried away through erosion, streaming down rivers, and ending up settling to the bottom of shallow or deep ocean environments. Students then observe actual sedimentary rock and to begin to recognize that it's composed of compressed and compacted layers of sediment, sand, and small particles of rock. They create a model of sedimentary rock by layering sand and gravel on top of one another, to understand how they're composed of initially loose pieces that over time compress and are cemented together to form rock. Students return to the book Clues from the Past to read in more depth about this process. As students prepare for the focus task, they use a modeling tool to model how fossils get covered by sediment, compacted over time, and ultimately become a part of a rock layer. By this point in the unit, students should be able to explain Progress Build 1. Sedimentary rock forms when sediment piles up and hardens over time. Fossils can form in the rock if organisms are buried in the sediment. For the Progress Build 1 focus task, students take this understanding and apply it to the rocky outcrop in Grand Canyon National Park, explaining to the director how on earth that fossil got there. Please take a few minutes to complete this task and then check back here for an exemplar answer. Go ahead and pause now. Great, here's an exemplar response. Go ahead and compare it to your own, pausing now. All right, on to big question number 2. How can we figure out what the environment was like in the past? Students read the book through the eyes of a geologist to learn how scientists make inferences based upon rock layers about what an environment might have been like. Swampy, hot, tropical, cold, icy, sandy, underwater, oceanic, floodplains. Those are some of the possible environments the scientists encounter when they look at rock layers in sedimentary rock. Students compare rock samples and notice differences between those as they make observations and diagram them. Students then read the book Fossil Hunter's Handbook to learn more about how fossils get trapped in rock layers, and how by looking at fossils and the types of animals that created those fossils, we can make inferences about what those environments must have been like, such as the frog who must have lived in a watery environment. Students then update their sedimentary rock layer to begin to understand how the older layers are at the bottom and new layers form on top over time. Students return to the simulation and look at examples of environments such as upper rivers, floodplains, beaches, shallow oceans, and deep oceans to better understand what types of organisms lived in those environments and what types of fossils they make. At this point in the unit, students should understand Progress Build 2. Different sedimentary rock forms in different environments. A rock layer's type and the fossils inside it can be used to make inferences about what the environment was like when the rock layer was forming. At this point, students apply their knowledge of the unit to answer the Progress Build 2 focus task. They're given more information about the layers in the rocky outcrop at Grand Canyon National Park and make inferences about what the environment used to have been like in the park. Go ahead and complete the task now and then check back here for answers. Go ahead and pause now. Great, go ahead and compare your answer to mine, pausing now. All right, you should have determined that the environment of the park used to be an underwater environment based upon the fossils that were there and the type of rock that the fossils were contained in. All this leads up to big question number 3. How can we figure out how old rocks and fossils are? We begin this part of the unit by doing a model where students lay different colors of paper on top of one another in order to model how sedimentary rock forms with the older layers on the bottom and newer and younger layers on top. Students then look at their completed class model of sedimentary rock with gravel and sand and discuss, once again, the relative ages of the rock layers. Next, they read the book Fossil Hunter's Handbook, where they learn about the inferences that scientists make from fossils that they discover, as well as relative ages, and more about how fossils form. Next, they use a modeling tool to model different layers of rock as well. Finally, they read the book Arguing to Solve a Mystery, about how scientists use evidence, inferences, and arguments to make claims about the past, such as how the dinosaurs disappeared. Finally, they return to the simulation and model the different relative ages of rock layers. By this point in the unit, students should understand Progress Build 3. The lowest layer of sedimentary rock formed first, and younger layers form on top. The order of rock layers can be used to infer which layers in fossils are older than others, and this can be used to tell the order of the environments that existed in this place in the past. Students apply this understanding to the Progress Build 3 focus task, where they're given now 2 layers that have been identified, but an unknown layer made of shale with fossils in it. Their job is to decide what type of environment that unknown layer used to be, and whether it was older or younger than the other layers in the rocky outcrop. Go ahead and take a few minutes to complete the task, and then check back here for answers. Pause now. And here's an exemplar completed response, correctly identifying the layer as a shallow ocean or just ocean layer, and the order of the layers from youngest to oldest here, as well as an exemplar explanation written here. Go ahead and compare it to yours, pausing now. On to big question number 4. How do fossils and other layers of rock get uncovered? In this part of the unit, students compare 2 different canyons, Desert Rocks Canyon and Keller's Canyon, and try and understand why more rock layers were exposed in Desert Rocks Canyon than in Keller's Canyon. Students read the book Rocky Wonders, where they're introduced to the idea of erosion and how it shapes the landforms and landscapes around us. Students use the simulation to compare the effects of fast or slow river speeds, as well as the amount of time passing, to see what impact that has on the depth of a river and its shape. Students use a physical model as well, pouring water through sand at different speeds, as well as for a longer time or a shorter time, to compare how this affects the shape and depth of the river. Students then use a modeling tool to do similar measurements of time and speed. To end the unit, they learn a little bit about natural hazards such as volcanoes and earthquakes, and how it affects rocks and rock layers as well as humans' habitations. Students look at maps and note that earthquakes and volcanoes tend to happen at the edges of continents, which serves as a foundation for understanding plate tectonics in later grades. By the end of the unit, students should understand Progress Build 4 about how water, ice, wind, living organisms, and gravity breaks rocks and creates the process of erosion, as well as understanding a variety of hazards from natural processes such as earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, floods, etc., and how humans reduce their impact. On to the end of the unit assessment. As in all our assessments, there are questions that relate to different standards as well as different progress build levels. The first progress build level is assessed with question number 1. Go ahead and take a minute to complete it and then check back here, pausing now. And here's the answers. Go ahead and check your work. Alright, on to progress build 2, which this question assesses. Take a minute to read it over and check back here, pausing now. You should have marked A, where the lower layers were formed earlier and the upper layers later on. Next question assesses Progress Build 3, uses the same diagram and asks a slightly different question about previous environments in the past. Go ahead and complete it, pausing now. And the answer is B. Layer Z was once underwater, due to the fact that there's silt, salt, and sand in it. Finally, here's a question that assesses Progress Build 4. Go ahead and read it over and complete it now. Pausing now. And you should have gotten D. The river eroded the land to form a valley in the middle. Alright, that wraps up our time together. Thank you very much for putting in the effort to be as prepared as possible to teach this unit to your students. For KIPP teachers, please complete the following steps to be fully prepared for the unit. And thanks again.